So call a meeting to order February 5th. The first thing on our agenda is the discussion of wetlands buffer ordinance. This is coming back to us from mayor and city council, even though they've already passed it, correct?
Correct.
And now they're just asking us if it's good enough.
Yes, they've asked for you guys to take a second look. I know they had asked about additional experts reviewing it, and I believe I even got some additional information since then, is that at the water workshop, not the most recent one, but the previous one, that there were a number of experts that did provide information regarding wetlands buffers. So we could reach out to them again. I know there was comment from the public and a couple of people wanting to know why not 100 feet. And there was some questions about if there was any information regarding Lewis specific wetlands. I am not aware of any information about Lewis specific wetlands. I typically use the data from the state, and then typically if there's wetlands on property, they are delineated when development happens. So that's the information I have. We are more than happy to discuss. You guys think there needs to be changes? I'm here. If we want to try and reach out to additional scientists, we can do that. But I know the one big thing was there was concern about data Lewis specific, and I'm just not aware of that data existing.
So how do you guys feel about the current? It's 50 foot. I know, Joe, you were there when we developed it, and Brent, obviously, you were a big part of this as well. Nancy, are you up to speed on the buffer zone, or do you have any questions about it as it stands right now?
I don't really have any questions on it. I mean, I think when I heard the discussion at City Council, it seemed to be more, 50 versus 100 versus 75, and that seemed to be the main discussion I was hearing. I understand why people would like to have very specific data for Lewis, but I'm certainly not aware of any. So,
is this something that someone feels we need to commission a study over?
I don't think so. I think it's just a list, and we go if we do it, the state and the federal. I think we've got all bases covered.
So basically, we feel that we have all the information we need right now to make the decision and say what distance we want on our buffers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think we also have to go with what we're going to get. I think we can only be just so ambitious, especially when you see how the county's been struggling with this. It's a place to start, and it's a place that I think all facets of the city seemed like they could. I mean, some people didn't want any. So it's a compromise for sure, as all of this is. But I'm okay with it. It's better than nothing.
You're okay with it? 50?
It's a good baby steps.
Yeah.
So does anybody on the commission feel that we need to change it from 50 to 100 or find more facts or reasons to change it?
No. John, I think the people who want to see it bigger are the people who don't have wetlands on their property, and they're in favor of anything that doesn't affect them and affects the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, nobody who's got a wetland backyard is going to want a bigger distance. No, this is the, this affects the other guy, and I'm fine. So, we're getting graphic here. Sorry.
Nice graphic.
Well, and there are other things that factor into it then as well in the design of a major subdivision. So it's not like at 51 feet, bad things are going to happen. There are other factors. And if we did that big a change, we'd have to start over with public hearings, in my opinion, because that's a huge change. You can't just double something and then think that no one's going to notice. I think you have to go back to square one.
Oh, yeah, if there's any proposed changes, it would be an amendment to the ordinance, which would require public hearings and public comment. So just because we have 8 people listening, just if any proposed changes go back for any type of ordinance, of course, there will be public outreach and public comment through public hearing processes.
And this is consistent with the state and other jurisdictions, isn't it?
Well, like the county has no regulations on wetlands. They've really stalled, and this would have been very consistent with some of theirs and actually exceeded some of theirs. It exceeds some of the other towns in Sussex County, some of the beach towns. It's smaller than some others. So I think yes, it's kind of consistent with the others in the area.
Yeah, I said consistent, not identical.
Correct. Yes.
In the ballpark.
I also feel as though when we went through this, we did do it justice and gave it some serious due diligence. And I felt that the people we had come in and advise us and discussion on both sides was pretty healthy, which is how I believe we ended up at the 50 range, which again is very consistent with surrounding areas that do have these types of regulations in place. So what's the sense of the commission then? Is it that we keep it at 50 and go about business? Okay, all right.
I'm comfortable with 50. If somebody wants to run it past somebody, I think anybody from Water Workshop 2 are going to have to start paying people because they spent an inordinate amount of time preparing and then being there. And I feel bad about that because a lot of them were on the county committee and they spent, I don't know how many hours, probably 100 hours apiece, and it's come to naught. And I know at least one of them will never volunteer for anything again after that. So I'm not adverse to running it past somebody, but I think I'd also like to see it actually in practice. And I mean, is there any reason we can't put a placeholder on it? And after it's actually, we try it, we can review it and see if it did what we think.
I think that's a good recommendation, is that you would you'd recommend that no changes be made and see a couple projects go into place first and then see how those did. And then if any changes are necessary, look after it's actually been put into place. Does that sound like a fair thing to do? I mean, again, that's just an option.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Janelle, do you have anything in the pipeline?
I do not at the moment.
No.
Not a major subdivision with wetlands on it. I do not.
It could be 6 months, a year, who knows?
Right.
It's true.
All right, so we're gonna recommend no changes and revisit in the future.
Okay. And just for those who are listening, if you don't mind putting your comments into the chat, that would be very helpful because that way we can record that.
Yeah, is there anything coming in from the crowd?
Yeah, I know if somebody has their hand up, and I'd prefer to get into the chat because the chat actually does get recorded since we're recording the meeting. Okay. So
Great.
I'm gonna give it a minute, and if I believe it was Mr. Quill who had his hand up, so he can just type his info into the chat. And I'm not.
So looks like we don't have anything coming in.
Correct.
We just move forward.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is looking at the excellent recharge area of the source water protection overlay zone. So I'm just going to give some background to this one, if nobody minds, and for the members of the public. 2008, 2007 timeframe, the state required all municipalities and over 2,000 people in population, that is the city of Lewis, to adopt a source water protection overlay zone. That included, there are two distinct categories to this. One is a wellhead protection that protects what goes around and what happens in land use and lot coverage to the wellheads. There are no wellheads in the city. And then it also has a section that looks at protection of ground excellent recharge area, which is a protection of the water that goes back into the ground. Typically, it impacts the aquifers, and that has a lot coverage calculation to it. Turns out, it was brought to the city's attention a couple years ago. For some odd reason, it just was not being enforced. So we've had a couple projects come through. We recognize that it was identified as being in there. We've had some concerns, so we've taken a different approach, because right now the code says if you're in the excellent recharge area, and again, that's the only section that impacts it. And on the website under this subcommittee, there is a map that shows the general area, and the main area is from Gills Neck Road across the bay, across the canal to the bay, is the area that the excellent recharge area affects the city. That the area has a maximum lot coverage of 20%. If you want to go over that percentage, you have to do a study. That study requires some testing to be done and other things, and that can get you up to 50% lot coverage. Again, we've recognized, haven't been doing that a whole lot. There's been a lot of houses that have been built since then. Again, the lots in that area the house can occupy 50% and their entire lot coverage can be 65%. So we've done a little bit of research, done some things. I've drafted an ordinance that kind of takes a different approach to it. Instead of limiting the lot coverage to 20%, it's reducing the lot coverage by making you put in best management practices. And for those who are asking questions, those best management practices came from the Quinn report, the city's flood study, a report that was done for, I think, the Association of Coastal Towns, for KCI. So a lot of best management practices. So we could take a look at, if we're going to allow the lot coverage that has happened and to continue to recognize that, how about we get some best management practices to get that water back into the ground? So to reduce the impervious surfaces, but allow for better ways to clean the water and better ways to get the water in, to help alleviate some of those issues that are going on. So that is what has been drafted, and that is what's for your consideration. And I just did a quick overview, and I am happy to provide a lot more information.
Is it okay, John, if I speak?
Please do.
Thank you. As soon as we got this, I really took a deep dive into all the paperwork with it. And I also listened to the mayor and council's public hearing on Monday. And what I heard then confirmed what I was thinking. Because what I noticed was that this was based on data gathered in 2004, which in 2008 was one thing, but in 2021 is another thing. My suggestion is that we need to update this basic data with a couple of things in mind. Once we have new data, we can create an ordinance that is specifically suitable to Lewis, because we are a beach community. And when you look at our excellent groundwater recharge area, it's some of the most popular and beautiful parts of the city. And so just a blanket limit to that 20% is just, I think, inappropriate for where we are. I think that what we've been doing in the last few years, especially, and when you look at our action plan, you can certainly see it. We've been hiring experts and then going where the science takes us. And I think my suggestion is to do the same here. Hone in on some of the experts, especially in the last water workshop and maybe the first water workshop, because we had people from the Delaware Geologic Survey then, get their suggestions for what our area is and what really works for us for not only the land and the water, but the people. Because it's all got to factor in. You just can't basically block it out. That's just, in my opinion, not right. So that is my suggestion, that we consider, or even ultimately, I'm hoping tonight, we make a motion for the rest of Planning Commission's consideration, that we hire some experts to quickly develop some data that we can use, while also researching what other beach communities do, because this is a problem everywhere.
Actually,
And
go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead. That's all right.
None of the other beach communities are required to do it. They don't meet the threshold. I also did a little bit of research, and I think I left that note at the office, that Henlopen and Acres has wells in the area. So they would need to have it. There is nothing in Dewey, I believe. No, there's nothing in Rehoboth Beach, so there's no excellent recharge. There is part of Henlopen and Acres wellheads the area falls into Rehoboth Beach, but there's no excellent recharge in Rehoboth Beach. There was no excellent recharge or wellheads in Dewey. And then Bethany Beach, South Bethany, Fenwick Island, Millville have not adopted it and are not required to adopt it. And I want to say Ocean View, I believe, did adopt an ordinance to deal with source water. Source water protection. And and again, what we adopted as a city was very close to the model code that DENREC provided us. And that's what pretty much everybody adopted throughout the state when the regulations came through, is we adopted model ordinance. Everybody tweaked it a little bit, but typically that's what was adopted. So most of the other beach towns are not required to have this zoning overlay, and do not have the zoning overlay. The data came from DENREC. The research came from with work done by a hydrologist with
Right.
the Delaware Geological Society. Sorry, my words are gonna get tangled tonight. So, and I have reached out to him. He was just getting back into the office. So I know that there's concern that the data is old. I don't see, because the area is so sandy, that the ground not being considered excellent recharge, because of the way the soils are. And Brent can jump in at any point and tell me if I'm off base. And again, my proposal is to get rid of the 20%.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how do we get rid of the 20%, but then also how do we get the water to still infiltrate, which is again, I think something that we want to do, because the excellent recharge area, while we might not be getting specific water from it for wellheads, it does help with saltwater intrusion.
Oh, definitely. And the Henlopen Acres comes from an unconfined aquifer. And I know the wells out at Cape Henlopen State Park do get saltwater intrusion from time to time. So these are realistic things. And I'm not saying they're unimportant things. I'm just saying, to kind of come in here and with the 20% from the state is just not.
Yeah, that's what's currently in code.
I don't think it's in anyone's best interest, nor is it realistic. And I think that we can do something with finesse and information that will get us where we need to go, that not only keeps people being able to enjoy their property, but also keeps the recharge. I mean, I can't believe that that's not possible. It will take some work.
Yeah, and again, that's what the proposed ordinance is for, is to allow for an increase in lot coverage while getting the water through in best management practices, which is going to help get the water through faster. It could potentially help reduce flooding impacts. Because again, some of them are rain gardens, some of our pervious surfaces for driveways. other things like that. So we're looking at that. And we did get a comment that there are several reports written by the Delaware Geological Society on aquifers covering the aquifer. These need to be considered as the impact of sea level rise. And this ordinance is actually very similar to what is being drafted as part of the sea level rise ordinance. Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, a question for Janelle. From the towns you quoted that don't have issues like that, it sounds like we're providing water for everybody else. I mean, we are the recharge area for this whole part of the Cape, or what?
No, there's the entire state. There's excellent recharge areas throughout the entire state.
Okay.
There's wellhead protection areas throughout the entire state. Based on the categories of the soil types and other things that go on with the soil, that the area between the canal and the bay has determined that it's an excellent recharge area, which means the water is getting back into the aquifer at a faster pace, which is something you want to do. We're not saying, because I can't verify if anybody's taking water out of where the water is going. I can't say that. I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not a geologist. But what we're trying to say is that from a water quality perspective, it is important to protect the aquifer. One, it might be somebody's water provider. I don't know. I can't answer that one. But it also helps, again, water quality, just overall water quality, helps with what we are starting to see is saltwater intrusion, those types of things. So it's not just somebody's drinking water, which I know a lot of people like to consider it. And I think we just need to take a larger approach and a step back going, it's not all about who's drinking this water. It's about the protection of our water. And if this is one of the spots where, and again, this happens, I know, happens in Seaford, it happens in Dover, it happens in, up in Newcastle County, Kent County. There are areas where, the water, there's places where the water just infiltrates better, has a higher tendency to get into the ground and get back into the aquifer faster, that needs some protection. Because if say you allow certain, because there are some prohibited uses, and they're typically more hazardous industrial uses that you don't want in that area, because if you allow for some of those uses to occur there and something happens, well, if for some other reason there's a spill, and I'm just going hypothetical, nobody take this as anything, as just a hypothetical, that can get into the water, into the aquifer faster. And that's what we have here, is how do we just protect what we've got? And then attached to the sea level rise best management practice, there are design guidelines. So I've been doing this with sea level rise, and they wanted to do some design standards, some guidelines as to, okay, 1-for-1 equivalent, just because it's like, oh, if you put it in a rain barrel, well, okay, that only handles so much, but you're getting so much back. So there are some design guidelines. If you look at the sea level rise ordinance on their website, there's some draft design guidelines you can look at. So I just wanted to get that big picture out there, because everybody just wants to kind of focus. And there is a bunch of data. I have reached out to the person who's done that. He was not available to attend tonight's meeting, and we just have not been able to connect because he was getting back into the office today.
Well, I think everybody agrees the groundwater is a good idea. I think it's sort of the approach, not of what you've done, but of what the state mandated, just because we've gotten rid of overlays because they're confusing and troublesome, because people miss the fact that the overlay affects them. So we were trying to get rid of all overlay zones for a long time because there was a lot of hassle and confusion and inequity. So I'm not sure in the long term that an overlay is the best way to do it. It's sort of one of the action plan items, like, the next revision of zoning, how do we look at things? And that might be part of it.
Yeah, this is the only overlay that we're allowed to adopt because it's a state mandate. Otherwise, we're not allowed to. I don't think it's actually called an overlay zone for us. It's called the Source Water Protection Ordinance. And we just map it to show where it goes and what properties are impacted, because overlays we are not allowed to adopt by state law. Something weird in the charters. But we have that one, and I think right now we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to amend it. And so I will shut up now and let you guys talk.
Oh, thank you so much for the information. I see we got one more new message. It's about from Sumners, maybe jumping the gun, but I have a couple questions regarding that application of several of the BMPs without further qualification from this area. I want to be appropriate to raise this more particular questions. I don't think we're there yet at this stage. Are we to be that specific about diving into the BMPs? Do we want to discuss the BMPs that you have listed there?
However you guys want to attack this, you just let me know.
Okay. Well, are there applications currently pending with the city that this would affect? Like, how do we handle that? If we say we want to kind of stop everything, is there anything pending right now that this could affect?
So currently there are permits on hold because we have recognized we need to begin enforcement. But the city, I'm hoping at Monday night's meeting for council, they held a public hearing on creating a moratorium, a short-lived moratorium for, I think, no more than 6 months at the longest, to put the enforcement of this in place, because there are a number of building permits. They just happen to come in. We checked them. They are on hold. If the moratorium goes into place, there is a vote expected. I don't know which way it'll go, but there's a vote expected on Monday night regarding if the moratorium goes in place, then they can continue to move forward without having to comply. But if we can't continue to have a moratorium in place. We need to quickly, as it was explained to me, get something going so we can recognize the situation that we have.
And that's what this draft ordinance seeks to do, is get that discussion going. I've went through it. I don't think I have any real specific questions about it. I think I'm in favor of that, getting the moratorium going and getting experts to really look at this, or looking at the data and coming up with a good solid plan. Does anybody have any other input or questions about the ordinance? Nancy?
You're muted, Nancy.
Sorry, I just wanted a little more clarity on what we'll be asking the experts to weigh in on and what other data we're talking about. I just want to make sure we know what we're looking for, so we get the information that we need.
I was thinking that the question would be something along the lines of, given what we have and who we are and what the recharge area is all data still the same? And what approaches are there that would allow us to remain a beach community? Because that to me is the fair thing. At this point, we have to protect that groundwater recharge, but we also have to live there. It's what we choose to do. And I just think that we let the science take us where we are. And I'd like to have updated science. I think even if they come up with the same thing, then I would feel better about it. I just think something from 2004 is old at this point to be basing such important legislation on.
Mhm.
I mean, I like Janelle's ideas of this and working this in. I think this is a good, if at the very least, a stopgap and maybe the final answer. But I'm not sure, if that could be accomplished quickly, if we have a 6-month moratorium, if that could be accomplished in 3 months, I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah, and actually that my other two questions were, one, how long do we think it would take? And, how quickly could we get on this if we chose that path forward,
Right. I agree.
And then
Can
the
I
other thing
ask?
is
Go ahead. Sorry, Nancy.
similar to Sumner's comment. I have a lot of questions about the BMPs in terms of what they would actually mean, and how you operationalize implementing some of those to ensure that if someone actually uses 2 or 3 of them out of the right category, out of a mix of categories, et cetera, that it actually has a consistent input, because a consistent impact. It's just that each one didn't seem to me kind of equivalent in terms of the overall impact, and you wouldn't want to have a situation where you could pick a number of them and have just a negligible kind of impact.
So similar to what is going on in the sea level rise is we required them to be reviewed by the city engineer or an engineer to make sure they're actually doing something. And we put some design guidelines in place to help, make sure that it's like, okay, well, to make sure that offset equals what you're going to be gaining.
Okay.
And we have a couple of people. Stephen Cahill would like to talk. And then Tom, and I think Rick Quill would like to speak. And then Tom Panetta had, in addition to the impact of sea level rise and groundwater contamination needs to be addressed. This was not addressed in any of the reports written in the early 2000s. Again, this ordinance is source water protection. The BMPs are actually going to help with groundwater contamination and actually help eliminate it or reduce it, help reduce impacts from that. Am I right on that, Brent, that any BMPs helps with reducing contamination to groundwater? And I got a yes from Brent.
Yes.
And I got a thumbs up on the previous question. And I'm gonna pick your brain, Brent, since you're the engineer, and I know you're not a hydrologist, and I have been speaking to a hydrologist. Is it typical that the data from 2004 is that out of date that the geology is going to change that much? I'm just curious because I know you're an engineer, and if you're not the right person, just tell me you're not the right person. If you have any background in that.
I don't.
Okay.
I just know that groundwater fluctuates from year to year. I know in the past 15 years, we've had a 100-year low and a 100-year high. So, since the last report, there's been a lot of up and down. Maybe it's changed, maybe it hasn't. But the geology for excellent recharge probably has not changed, because that has more to do with the soils, and the soils haven't migrated.
And again, I can reach out to the hydrologist from the Delaware Geological Survey that I'm working at, and ask him those questions. If you want me to, would you like me? Because it sounds like we have a bunch of questions. If you have a bunch of questions that I can ask him, and then I can bring back to you guys, is that a help?
I think that would be great.
And then I can also, because I think the first question is, which is what I was asking Brent, and he does not the expert, is how out of date is the 2004 data? And I think that sounds like the first question we need to ask, right?
I think so.
Okay.
And maybe it's extremely current, and that worry needs to be eliminated, and that's fine. If that's the answer, great. I just feel like we've been so science-based in the last few years. If we can bring that up to speed, and somebody may have some brilliant idea that we might be able to use and make things better.
Yeah. It sounds like Tom wants to bring in some experts to the subcommittee. Is not a bad idea. Sumner has two questions. What is the full nature of hydraulic connection between the two sides of the canal, given the thickness of the unconfined aquifer in this area? Most importantly, does it in any way compromise the future of Lewis public water supply? I'm guessing that's one for our experts. Yeah.
Yes. I think a good thing is you guys have got a bunch of questions. I'm trying to write those questions down.
Okay.
But if everybody say by Monday, end of work on Monday, Tuesday, gets me all of those questions that you have, and then I can talk to the person I have in contact, then I can get you guys that data. Does that sound reasonable?
I think that
That'd be
sounds
very helpful.
Okay.
And what does, I mean, do we want to move forward with what Janelle has in the interim, so that those poor folks who've got applications in process can know what they're doing?
I think that's a wise idea.
Okay.
The better.
And I'm going to let Steve Cahill talk because he's been waiting patiently. And then I'm going to let Rick Quill talk because he's been waiting patiently. Because I think Rick doesn't have the ability to chat. So I'm going to promote you. I'm going to let you talk, Steve. You just need to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Friday.
Thank you.
Just a little background on myself. I grew up in Delaware. I went to the University of Delaware, a degree in geology. I actually interned at the Delaware Geological Survey. I've been practicing geology for about 35 years now. When I got the call for this project from Rick, I looked at the code and I looked at the site, and I certainly could have, made some good money on this project, probably $20,000 for the initial evaluation. And then there's, the requirements for ongoing groundwater monitoring, water management agreements to be placed with the county, with the city, and so forth. And when I looked at where the site's located, I just did a little research and realized that, you have a really unique situation here. Between the canal and the bay, you have this almost an island. And there's saltwater intrusion has been established well under the canal since the 1950s. So you essentially, anything that infiltrates onto Lewis Beach is freshwater. It's lighter than saltwater. It might mix a little bit, but it essentially discharges into the bay and into the canal. So it doesn't contribute to the aquifer that supplies the drinking water. And when I looked at the code specifically says in a number of places specific to protecting drinking water. So there are really two issues here. I don't think this area contributes to protecting drinking water, but you want to recharge the water. You want to protect other resources. You want to reduce runoff and so forth. I think that one of the big issues is when you look at the code and the requirements, they're really geared towards probably, I would say, commercial properties and bigger properties. Imagine going to a resident in Lewis Beach and saying they have to prepare a climatic water balance and determine recharge before and after. They have to do soil borings test pits, infiltration tests. They have to install groundwater monitoring wells and monitor those wells. They have to go into water management agreements with the city and the county. So I think the thing that needs to be done here is we want recharge. It's just how you get there and what the requirements are. And I think you're in a unique spot where you could promote recharge, but I think you have to step back on how you get there.
Thank you.
And again, I know, recharge does inhibit saltwater intrusion. And we want to keep recharge on this area. But saltwater, the proximity of the bay right there, you're going to always have saltwater intrusion underneath that canal to certain extents. So on the land side of the canal, you probably want to keep more restrictions. You want more infiltration. You want to maintain that because as we had a discussion with DENREC last week, and you want to take care of that part of the aquifer, even though it's not directly in that wellhead area. Because if you pave over everything, you're not going to get the recharge and groundwater is going to move around and it's going to affect eventually your wellhead area. But you have this isolated spot out there on Lewis Beach. It's just a unique situation. And the source water program was a sweeping program. So it doesn't look at these kinds of situations. And again, I'll say, I said this at the council meeting, I love Lewis. I spent a lot of time there. Cape Henlopen is my favorite spot in the world off season.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Very much.
And Steve brought up a good point. It's a little bit confusing in the ordinance that a lot of it refers back to the wellheads. And that's also one of the items in the draft ordinance is to also understand that since our wellheads are not in this area, that we are also looking at the overall protection of water quality. Okay, so I'm going to bring up Rick Quill.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Just from my experience, any water falling on Lewis Beach is not going to affect Henlopen Acres. My opinion.
Okay, Rick, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes. There's
Okay.
there's a feedback, Rick.
Now can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
hold
but-
on.
Okay.
I don't know why that is. Why is that?
I think, Rick, you're in the meeting on two devices because your name appears twice in the panel. So if you get out of one of your devices.
Okay, then I'm gonna shut it down and go back.
Okay.
But I do want to speak to this committee.
So there is another comment from Sumner that two, will increased recharge make a difference with respect to reducing the potential for saltwater intrusion potentially? Okay, one, we need to take the wells out of this because our wells nowhere in this area. But yes, excellent recharge does impact and can impact the saltwater intrusion. It can keep it away for a little bit. So, and I have gotten that from multiple experts. So it's not me saying this is me having had conversations with multiple experts saying, yes, that does happen. And Tom said BPW needs to be active. Part of this discussion, we have discussed this with BPW, and they are aware of this application. So any questions, comments while Rick tries to come back in? Sorry, I interrupted and you guys were talking about the draft ordinance.
No, thank you. I think it was great information from Mr. Cahill. Hopefully Rick can get back online with us.
So I know you were liking the draft, or you could be wrong, but you seem to want to be moving forward with the draft ordinance. If you want to get back together, I can take kind of, because sea level rise has really kind of dug into some of this and provide like the design guidelines, which I think will address some of Nancy's questions. And also the fact that we've required an engineer to review them. Because think about this, this is going to happen when a new house is built or redevelopment at a certain point happens. So if your house currently exists, no impact, you're fine. It's the new houses, which are actually becoming less and less because so many new houses are being built in the area. But that's what we want to capture. And when a new house comes in, they're going to have to provide building plans, and we're going to ask for this information to be provided and go through a review. And that's, again, because we recognize the importance of best management practices. So this has also been tracking in the sea level rise. And it looks like Rick is back. So we're gonna try this again. Okay.
Hey, Janelle, can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah, you were talking about best management practices, and I think Kay brought up a good point earlier. And I think that's the balancing, how you design and make recommendations or requirements for getting water back in the ground. I think that's one of the main thrusts of, reducing runoff, maintaining what you want for the town, for the people, and balancing that.
Yeah, and I think we took that into consideration with all the best management practices, because there's a lot of like rain barrels, cistern, pervious pavement, and then there's the bigger ones. So we're trying to make it so that it's not overly burdensome for the property owner while still providing information. And just so everybody knows, I did not make up the best management practices. The scientists who provided the reports to the city gave us the best management practices. And if you all remember, the resiliency report had a bunch of best management practices. I gave a presentation at Planning Commission a couple months ago. The best management practices in this ordinance came from all of those reports. So that's there. Okay.
It's just how you apply them in, different situations.
Yes, that's why we want to have the engineer review them, because we recognize that my property, though even in an excellent recharge area, one BMP might work better than another BMP.
Right.
So having them reviewed, I think, makes sure that it gets to the intent of groundwater protection.
And typically they want you to recharge rooftop water, which is considered, quote, clean. And I kind of have this vision of, you for new construction redevelopment, maybe you build in some kind of simple recharge trench that can take as much water as it can in the ground with an overflow that goes to stormwater, and put everything in the ground you can. But just don't make folks go through these, getting into legal agreements with the county and the city and having to put monitoring wells in their property and have them sampled every quarter and things like that. Yeah, and you don't, and this is unique again, because you don't see this in other areas, residential areas, because typically, they have larger lots where they can stay under 20%. So, and again, Rehoboth doesn't have it and Dewey doesn't have it. So you are in a unique position.
Okay, Rick, you just need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to put a little meat on the bones, a little flesh on the bones. So everybody on this committee will understand that this, and it's not to be combative or antagonistic to the town. We all make mistakes. The town has described this as an oversight. So let me, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I think you really should know. I'm a layperson, so I thank Steve Cahill. He was hired by us, by our engineer, and I've gotten an education somewhat. And if I'm wrong, I would love to be to know that what I say is not right, and I apologize.
It looks like he has frozen. So hopefully he will be able to join us momentarily.
Rick, you froze up, Rick.
Involvement is in this. It's my business partner and I own the property. Well, the bank owns the property across from Dairy Queen. We had no idea what it even was. And to this day, I'm a layperson, so it confuses me somewhat. We were tasked by our engineer, by the town, that we would have to do it. And it didn't sit well with me, but you know, it's on the books. It's on the books. Not knowing about it is no excuse to not have to abide by it. So in our bid processing, we had talked to a couple through our engineers. I had no idea who did this. One was Hines and Associates or something like that out of Baltimore, and it was another person, and then the third one was Duffield and Associates. I've never had any associations with Duffield, but that's when Steve brought up to you that that indeed my engineer got back to us and said he questioned the merits of having to do this testing, and so we commissioned him to do a report for us. By the way, the city of Lewis has it. And a little bit further investigation to put meat on the bones is I talked to Lewis BPW also. Now, I don't want to get into this fray because I guess it's a tenuous position. I don't even know what all the dynamics between you guys are, between the town and Lewis BPW. But in my review of my comp plan, I said, well, Lewis BPW has the autonomy over all the utilities, including stormwater and water and all that in Lewis Beach. So I talked to Darren Gordon, and he referred me to what they call the State of Delaware Geological Survey Report, investigation number 65, dated 2003, wellhead protection area delineation for the Lewis Rehoboth Beach area, Delaware, by 3 noted scientists. So in the process of learning what's going on over here is the wells on Lewis Beach were capped many years ago, 1945 or 1955. And then when they were capped, it's because there was, saltwater intrusion, contamination. Again, I don't know all the details about that. What we since learned in that is, so I opened up the dialogue with DENREC. And DENREC tells me, and I could get it wrong, and maybe Steve or somebody could correct me again, is source water migrated down from Newcastle County because they recognize that, we have to protect our source water, potable water, all across the state. The Delaware Geological Society was tasked to map equitably, without exception, throughout the state, through tens of thousands of documents, surveying, aerial, whatever, what are the excellent recharge areas are.
We lost you, Rick.
Looks like he's having some connection issues.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now.
Well, so
He's going in and out.
I'm sorry. There's some areas that are unique, and that's in this report. But so they started the state of Delaware latching on to Newcastle County source water initiatives, mandated, I guess, through DENREC in the state of Delaware, that every town through the state of Delaware where excellently recharged wellhead overlays, whatever you want to call them, should equitably designate them and mandate in each municipality a code to address it. Sussex County, the county itself, had a 30 to 60% ordinance. Lewis, by the way, each town was supposed to have this on their code by 2006. Lewis went a step further, a little bit more, so you could be applauded for the town and the governance. They said, no, we're not going 30 to 60. We're going to go 20 to 50%, even more stringent. But it took them 2 years past the deadline to enact this code into their ordinance. Well, okay, whatever it is, it is. So when we were asked to go look at this and take a look at it, I asked for some freedom of information. And again, I just like to get to the bottom of it and see where this is all going, because again, we had no idea. And after Steve Cahill talked to us, I contacted the town through an FOI request. And they sent me, I said, and my question was, how many people were required to do this? Because I'd like to get their information, whatever city has in documentation, for their requirements of testing to marry with ours, specifically properties right around us. And no, the property right next to us, there was built a 4-story, supposedly B&B. And this is what they and if you guys want to look into, I challenge you to look into the records. They send me a memorandum from the mayor and council, from Anne Marie Townsend and Tom West, this dated September 19, 2018. That's 5 weeks after we were granted to go from general commercial to resident R3. And over a year, nobody ever brought this up in any of the meetings. There was issues raised by the state review and our rezoning process, talked about water issues, but I challenge also to everybody on this committee to read the minutes throughout planning commission and mayor and council approval for this site to get rezoned. Nobody ever brought it up. They mentioned it, that there was water source problems, but again, I had no idea. So in effect, and 5 weeks after this, the town recognized, and it says here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's a paragraph, please read this. When the two city officials says, we believe that this is an oversight, that they have not enacted one property development or renovation for 10 years. Not one. I want you to think about that. From 2018 to 2019, when I was up in Boston and we were brought in there and we were told about it, and the 2000 to this date, not one other property was flagged to do this. I want you to really think about that. We're right now at the point where they have to do something. And I'll be quite honest with you. We've been working with Amber and Janelle. Janelle is really new, so I'm not throwing any shade on her at all. And I'm not even sure throwing any shade on Amber because people make mistakes. Let's go forward. So this is where we're at right now. And the moratorium, and I think one of the gentlemen, John, I think I'm reading your name up here, you pretty much nail it on the head because you have, and I didn't know this till this past Monday night. There are 5 applications pending right now for permitting that are held up, but only one of them qualifies for less than 20% development. So 4 now, and I have the list, cannot do anything unless and we have established it can cost anywhere from $13 open-ended to $30,000 per property or more to do a study before they can even get a permit approved. With that, technically, each property, and most R3 down here property are 5,000 square foot by definition. Like some are a little bigger, some are even smaller down on my side of town. So if you looked at 20.
Rick, we're losing you again, and I really do appreciate your comments. The proposed draft, and again, this subcommittee has nothing to do with the moratorium.
Yeah.
We do recognize there's an issue.
Okay, so let me finish. It's draconian. It reeks of bureaucracy. It's dead dogma. We welcome the science, like Kay Cornan says. Steve Cahill is one of the science. We welcome other science involved in this. And the basic fact is from what I understand is, the water that's being absorbed into the ground of an extra recharge area cannot even make it back to the wells, and the water, the potable water that's used in Lewis is 2.1 to 2.8 miles, and the flow of where the water comes from is the opposite direction, so it can't even flow back there. Again, Steve could recognize that. The last thing I want to mention to you guys is the city has put up 3 properties on Tennessee Avenue for sale. And I've asked this week through an FOIA Have they disclosed to any of those potential, I think they sold one, they might have sold all three. Have they disclosed in all their sales to any of those three property owners this ordinance? Because it could dramatically affect the building, because you would task each one of those with a $30,000 initial investment just to see how much they can build on that ground.
Mr. Quill, again, that is not something for this subcommittee, but we do appreciate your comments. So thank you. And again, the proposed draft ordinance would have the lot coverage remain as is. It would remove the 20%, but however, it would require best management practices to be utilized to maintain.
I'm aware of that.
That.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that,
No, I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to everybody.
Okay.
Because we got 7 people also listening on the line, so making sure they're all
Okay,
aware.
well, we all support that. Our scientists, or not our scientists, the scientists that we support that. We're not asking for, that not have price. I live over here. I realize the water, the intrusion of water keenly. We're not asking to just to go away. We're asking for fair and equitable and honest brokering going forward. I want to make that perfectly clear to this committee, because we're going to probably be before you again, or somebody, if they buy this property from you, it's going to be before you again. And all I ask, and I've already asked for the last 4 years, is fair and equitable, honest brokering treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Janelle.
All right, John,
All right,
it's back to you.
thanks. So is that about it for all the comments as far as the draft ordinance is concerned? Is there anything else we can discuss specifically? And definitely
Can I
thank Mr. Cahill
can I
and
add
Mr.
one?
Cook for the input. Sure, go ahead, Mr. Cahill.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on what Brent had discussed regarding, how things change through time regarding geology and things like that. The geology probably isn't going to change much unless, something major is done, from human activities. I will say that the hydrology may change. Groundwater levels have been, I monitor a lot of sites in Sussex County. I've done it for a long time. And, in 2019 and 2020, we've seen some higher water levels, higher than average. So I think the geology stays the same for the most part. The hydrology may change.
Thank you. And again, I think that's one of the questions I've got to ask somebody. So
do we feel like we have a pretty good list from our meeting tonight, and we'll kind of keep it open until close of business Monday? Is
or
that
at least noon on Tuesday. So like if something happens, like if you really want to get me your questions tonight, I would appreciate that. But it's Friday night, and
Hey, Janelle, thank you. You've got your hands full. I appreciate your time. And
oh,
everyone
no
else.
problem. And again, if people on the if there's something that needs to be asked, please reach out to me. So I have a good list of questions, so I can reach out to that person next week, so I can get some data back to you guys. So, because I know this has got it. Unfortunately, this one's got a fast moving time frame. So the faster you get me information, the faster I can get information back to you. Now, it sounds like you guys were good with the draft ordinance, but it sounds like we may be some tweaking. And I think that's going to follow similar what happened to the source water protection. So I'm sorry, sea level rise, lots of S's going on with projects. So do you guys want to take a look at that? That is actually all online for that section, or and then give me feedback.
Absolutely. I think if Sea Level Rise Committee, and appreciate those guys being here and offering the input as well. If you guys have gone through a lot of these best management practices within our city, I think it would be wise to check into that as well and consider that into this. So are we looking for, we're going to have to set another meeting date or figure out when we're going to revisit this, because I would like to get this done as fast as possible, especially given the nature of it, pulling people up.
So next week we cannot meet because I cannot post an agenda. And I don't think we want to meet on a Friday again. I could be wrong about that.
Somebody has
No,
a
you
party.
Oh,
to
actually,
go to.
workaholics, but I'm seeing some
You are
heads,
not wrong.
heads nod no. And I do appreciate this. Otherwise, this was the only day that worked. Otherwise, we'd be out for a couple more weeks.
So when we looking at coming back? Maybe you have the schedule there of what's available for us.
What does the 16th or the 17th look like for you
17th
guys?
is a regular meeting.
Yes, but oh, that's right. You are at a 5:30. Okay, let me get into something else because I need to make sure. I think we're gonna have to come up with a couple of dates because I'm gonna have to go through and make sure we don't impact any other meeting dates.
There's regular planning commission on the 17th.
Yes, so that one's out. Monday, the 15th is actually a holiday.
Right.
We could do that Thursday.
18th. I can't do that. I've got
Okay.
well, actually, well, it'd have to be much later.
What does
Like,
the 16th look like?
16th is good for me, and I could do the 15th.
I have
If you
a
need- no.
6 PM on the 16th. So if
Okay.
it were earlier, I could do it.
16th, I've got a 6 p.m. as well.
Okay, so but the 18th is looking good.
I can't do the 18th.
You can't do the 18th.
Why don't you do the
I could do
16th earlier?
I
And
could-
I won't be able to attend, but that's okay.
Okay. Since you guys have a 6 o'clock, do you want to do like 3:30, 4 o'clock? Because I
16th,
know the earliest John can do is 3:30, right?
I could do 3.
You can do 3.
Yeah, I could do 3.
I could be a guest if you need a quorum.
Thank you.
Would be.
But the
Would that
commission members make up the quorum.
That was a joke.
I know. Just
But I do.
appreciate it.
I'm very interested in how this works out. You know, I kind of feel like I sparked it a little bit, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
I think we all want a quick resolution to this.
You know,
Yes. So
that-
16th at 3.
Okay.
I will make sure because right now there's nothing on the city calendar, but there might be
up with the
something that's
backup.
hiding on me.
You want to come up with a backup date real quick, just in case?
That would be great.
All right. You want to look at next week of the 22nd? I could do Wednesday.
24th. Okay.
Wait, let me double check. Yeah, Wednesday, the 24th. Yeah.
Does that one work at 5:30
Would
I
for
can
me.
do 5:30.
on the 24th, John? Brian?
Mhm.
Okay. So first option is the 16th at 3. Second option is the 24th at 5:30. I will see. Because right now there's nothing, but there are sometimes standing meetings that I don't see that they haven't scheduled yet. So keep those dates on hold, and I will get back to you guys early next week on that. And again, you have homework for me to get me questions. Please get me as many questions as you need so I can get them answered so we can get this moving. Please review the sea level rise. There's a design guidelines. Again, they're all still draft. And then the most recent draft is also on their sea level rise ordinance, their subcommittee page for see how we've kind of broken down the best management practices. All right. Anybody, anything else?
Any motions to adjourn?
I want to thank everyone. I appreciate the meeting tonight.
Yeah, yes, sir, of course.
Thank you.
I think Joe had something.
Joe
Well,
has a-
I so moved this motion.
I'll second.
Thank you,
Jared,
everybody,
see
for
you.
showing up, and thank you everybody in the chat who participated. It was all really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have
Have
a
a
great
good-
weekend, everyone.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you so much and have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, bye.